And we're live. It is Saturday, May 23rd, 2020, 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. We're not allowed to have fun anymore, and I'm kind of low energy today, so I didn't even look up the Boris Johnson and Kim Jong-un and Murder Hornet news. But in lieu of fun, it's the 57th or 58th day in a row we've done this, and we weren't going to miss a day just for a little bit of that. So it's a seltzer kind of day. It's it may be a low energy kind of show, but we're going to play on the show, going to hang out, talk to Kate. I think Kate's having a higher energy kind of day than I am because she informed me during the pregame show. What kind of day is it, Kate?
Silk pajamas and pink John Deere hat kind of day. Are you there? You froze up a little.
Hard to argue with that.
Yeah, I know. That's how I feel. Oh my God. You know what might put you in a better mood, Ben? Are you there?
Let me fix my internet. You talk.
Okay. I have an agenda that I think that we should discuss today. I might have to repeat all of this when Ben comes back if he can't hear me. But
I can hear you.
Oh, you can. Okay. Yeah. Fix your internet. So I think that Ben will be buoyed when he gets back from fixing his internet by the fact that it appears that we have acquired some fresh Zoom trolls, a Mr. Jack Cough. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Has his hand up in the feed, and so I'm excited for what this portends. I think Ben gets a lot of satisfaction with deleting people without due process. This is like, by the way, like Bart Simpson. This is like Bart Simpson calling Moe's level of like acronyms or pseudonyms. We have a Mr. Ben Dover in the audience. Yeah, this is kind of fun.
And Jack Cough, yeah. Yeah, we got a lot. It's a bunch of new.
This will cheer you up, Ben. Deleting people from our feed.
Should we call on somebody?
Really? Are we gonna that's like really rolling the dice here. But
yeah, I think we probably shouldn't.
Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna say. But what I was gonna say is that we're coming up on our 2-month anniversary of doing the show. And not that time means much of anything these days, but I am kind of wondering, like, we should maybe set like some type of barometer that we have to or like metric or something that has to happen in the world or to us, in which like we won't do the show anymore.
Wow, that's an interesting thought. What would be the metric by which we would end the show?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, we kind of talked about doing it until like life went back to normal, but now it doesn't seem like that will ever happen. So
it's
completely
a very interesting question you've put on the table, but I'm really having trouble with my internet now. So you just keep talking.
I know.
I'm going to work on my internet.
Okay, keep working on your internet. I'm full of things. I'm going to start reading Rudyard Kipling poems. It's kind of like I feel as if I'm being asked to filibuster on the floor of the Senate or something. It's a good thing that I'm not in charge of who I can bring into the show, because Mr. Jackoff is continuing to raise his hand and asking questions in the QRA. saying that his name is Jeff. Anyways, this is kind of pretty hilarious. Are we better? Your
We're working
internet
on
cut
it.
out yesterday too.
It did?
How did you fix your internet so quickly?
I'm still working on it.
Okay.
It's not, you assume it is fixed, but I'm just trying to manage the problem. It's kind of like the COVID-19 epidemic, you know, it's you're never done managing the problem.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I didn't want it to be a downer. I actually was kind of thinking that like maybe the answer would be that we just change how we do the show, or maybe the answer would be that we end this show and start another one. Or maybe the answer is that the show goes forever. I don't know.
Well, the show can't go forever once we're back at work, or at least once I'm back at work, because I'm not usually free at this time of day.
But like, do you think you're actually ever going to go back to work?
I don't know.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Maybe the answer is we'll know when the show is over, when it's time for it to end.
When there's like something in which like the 5 o'clock appears and like someone asks us to do something at 5 o'clock and we can actually go do it in person or something.
Yeah, or it's like when something is going on that requires our presence. Hey, to Mr. Jack Off and Ben Dover, I think you're about to get evicted from the show here. So it was nice of you to join us. Thanks for playing, but this is the part where you disappear, and that is very satisfying to make you disappear. Goodbye, Ben Dover. Goodbye, Jack Off. Okay, they're gone now. Now, if anybody else wants to ask and you know,
I love
reach
they're
our
like
Q&A.
they're like pleading not to be pleading not to be ejected.
We actually do have a serious question from a member of the audience. Should we bring that person in while we're thinking about metrics of ending the show?
Yeah, sure.
All right. I don't know your name, so I'll just call you Bar JM.
Yeah, Tom McGuckin. I got evicted by you guys some time ago. You apologized, and I've been a regular of yours ever since then.
Yes, I remember we had you on the show.
Yes, yes. But listen, Ben, I got a serious question because it's just got under my skin. CNN, or actually, I guess George Stephanopoulos, I can never pronounce his name, long Greek name, had an interview of Biden. Okay, and they got on the topic of Flynn, and then Biden, I guess, sort of waffled some questions. So it's not really clear. But the whole point is, Natasha Bertrand and I were communicating by email. She doesn't really know me very well. But nonetheless, we were looking into this whole Woosley Flynn. Okay, you remember when Woosley walked into a meeting sort of during actually before the election, and Flynn was talking with some Turkish people about getting, let's say, I don't want
rendering Mr. Gulen, yes?
Correctamundo. And Woosley then said he went through an intermediary to report it to Biden. Okay, all right. This was all in the Wall Street Journal, I guess in 17. You and Hennessy, is that how you pronounce her name?
Yep, Susan Hennessy.
Yes, wrote an article about it back in the 17. I have found it.
Yep.
I think apparently Trump is bringing something back up during the transition with Biden. And I have a feeling, I'm just not sure, because Biden said he reported it to the courts, whatever that means. Do you remember all this, Ben?
I remember the issue very well. I'm not sure I remember Biden's role in it particularly, but Woolsey, yeah, Woolsey was appalled by Flynn's behavior in that meeting and talked about it around town, and it ended up being the subject of some investigation. Was surprised that when Mueller reached his plea agreement with Flynn, there was no reference to any of this stuff. So this was an issue that had to do with a supposed discussion about what sounded kind of creepily like a kidnapping plot with respect to Gulen and who's a dissident Muslim cleric in Turkey, who the current regime hates and has a lot of conspiracy theories about and blames for a lot of things and wants. And so apparently Flynn was in discussions with the Turks to somehow get Gulen to Turkey, to give him up.
Right.
And it was not entirely clear that the means they were thinking about were extradition as opposed to sort of illegal means. And I have never, other than that Woolsey talked about it pretty directly, I've never known why the matter was dropped. I assume that was because either there was a more plausible explanation for the discussions than I can think of, which happens sometimes in criminal investigations, or because they didn't feel like they could prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, and so it kind of got washed out in the plea agreement. I think it would be a rather dangerous matter to try to bring up against Biden, because at most the role that Biden played is that somebody who was appalled reported it to Biden, right? And I don't know that anybody did anything with it, including, by the way, Bob Mueller later, who was certainly aware of it. And so I'm not really sure what the blowback could be, except, of course, that all of the investigations have developed, conspiracy theories around them and have had blowback associated with them. And so, why should this one be any different?
Well, let me just say this. I think Trump is going to bring it up because he's talking about Biden's role during the transition, unmasking Flynn, okay, which I understand the unmasking is sort of a, red herring. I got that part. But the other part is that Biden sort of lied about it, okay? When George Stephanopoulos asked him about what he did during this, he said, I never had any contact with the FBI or anybody during the transition about Flynn, okay? So it's sort of curious if someone told him that Flynn was up to some nasties, and I don't know if they're true, okay? I'm a skeptic, but, and then Biden then later says, I don't know anything about this. I didn't do anything about it. All I'm saying is, I just think Trump is about to bring this back up.
Well, you may well be right. He's certainly brought up lots of other things that are unflattering to him and his people. I don't know whether what Biden said was inaccurate. Obviously, if he said things that were inaccurate, that's a potential problem for him legitimately. I also do think this is an area where Flynn himself, the facts are likely, whether they're criminal or not, they're likely very unflattering to him, because he does seem to have been involved in discussions about something like a rendering of somebody who lives here and is entitled to be here to a foreign hostile government. So I guess we'll see. And certainly thanks for bringing it to back to our attention. It's a very interesting issue, and it'll be interesting to see how it if it resurfaces and how it resurfaces. All right, on to other things. Should we plan the show for the week?
Yeah, I have one person lined up.
Who's that?
Radley Belko.
Oh, excellent. So say a little bit about Radley Balco, and then I'll tell you who I have, who I think I have lined up.
I also like, just to say something about Artist Week. One thing was like, it was fun and refreshing to kind of not talk about COVID and do something different. It was also like, I thought that I would easily, like I knew enough artists and like would have like no problem filling the week, but it was weirdly time consuming to like find people and line everything up. And it ended up taking, anyways, more energy than I've put into like most of the guests before. So just that as a thing. Yeah, it definitely took more inviting. Right. And so it was kind of like, I think that like our follower base is predominantly law, politics people that like already are pretty well versed in this persona of ours. But like, it was like, I had to reach out to a lot of groups that were not in that world at all, that like had no idea like anything about this. So it was just, which is like, good in a lot of ways, but it just was like more work than I was, one of the reasons we did this was like how low, like no planning it on the show type of thing. And I was like, Jesus, I have like all of this crap to do. And like, I'm also like scrolling through my like Twitter DMs, seeing who I can invite onto in lieu of fun. But anyways, I just, Radley's going to come on. I'm super excited. Radley has been a friend for a very long time. He is a libertarian, civil libertarian who predominantly most of his work focuses on kind of how fucked up the criminal justice system is, especially in regards to like certain types of evidence. So for instance, he wrote an incredible book basically debunking this widespread expert in bite mark identification that was, yeah, exactly. Thank you for demonstrating, Ben. Hold on, do that again, but say something so it can get caught on camera.
Yeah, so I want to make sure when people hear the phrase bite mark identification that they're thinking of this.
You look like a snapping turtle.
Sometimes you need the visual.
But so anyways, Radley and I have like, we are both, the criminal law is certainly not my specialty. I just enjoy and respect people who do work on it and do it well. And Radley is one of them. Where is he writing now? Is he still at the Washington Post? He had an amazing blog that got bought by first by Reason and then by the Washington Post. So anyways, he's going to come on. He's also an avid baker. He loves his dog, and he and I have a love of Johnny Cash, and he lives in Nashville with his wife, who is an advocate for like Innocence Project type stuff, and specifically an abolitionist for the death penalty. So,
interesting.
Yeah, and so maybe she'll come on at the same time. They don't have kids, so that might actually work out. But
so
yeah.
maybe we should make this Criminal Justice Week, because my guest, who I'm still working on because he's never used Zoom before, is somebody we mentioned the other day in talking to Dwayne, who spent a lot of years in Virginia prison for a bank robbery, and who I corresponded with back when, that involved writing letters by hand, and spent his time in Virginia prisons teaching people how to read, and also designing by hand these gorgeous New York Times quality Sunday crossword puzzles. But he would make them, by hand, because of course he didn't have any computers or software. And Ed is a really interesting, thoughtful guy. And
Yeah, what's his name? You didn't say his name.
his name is Ed Safran, and he's we've known, we've never met, we've never spoken, but we've corresponded by various means since he was in prison. And he got parole a few years ago, and now we correspond sometimes on Facebook. But I invited him to join us, and he said he'd love to, but will have to learn how to use Zoom. So we're going to work on that this week and see if we can get him.
Cool. That sounds great. I mean, that would be fun. We could have, I'm sure Barry Friedman would love to be on. He's at NYU and does the policing project, which is amazing. And there's, I think the criminal justice week could totally work. I mean, it's just it's depressing as fuck, but it could totally work.
But we could also do some people from who've done complex investigations, which is not a depressing subject, because your complex investigations are often the ones where it is actually most important, and that where there's the least injustice, right? Complex white collar investigations, it doesn't tend to do a whole lot of injustice to people.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm trying to think. Remember that great video that I sent you that my friend Alex did, who's an evidence professor at Arkansas? The one that was of him online teaching, that was very funny.
Oh yeah.
He's great. I would love for him to come on. He's really funny, and he does evidence, and we talk a lot about why the rules of evidence are so slow to change, and especially in kind of a digital age. You would be shocked if you went into a court, how nonsensical, not only it's going to be interesting. Radley's going to talk about how crazy some of the things that people take as gospel are when it comes to evidence, bite mark evidence, or thank you, Ben, or something like that. But then they won't, they don't understand how you can mess with a screen grab of a text message conversation, or a screen or how to authenticate something happening on Facebook, or something like that. All of the types of it's just, the courts are so behind on this stuff in so many ways. Also, now is a great time, if you have any suggestions of who we should invite on, to put them into our the Q&A.
And if you're one of the people in the audience, by the way, who knows that you should be a guest on on one of these subjects, because some of you, we know who you are, stop hiding back there, and we know who you are.
I could go far and wide on this topic. I could find judges. I could find prosecutors. I could find 8 million public defenders. It's just fascinating if you've never talked to a public defender about what their day-to-day caseload is and what their life is like. It is fascinating.
Yeah, and that's true, by the way, of these people are much harder to talk to, but that's true of the day-to-day life of an FBI agent too, for example. That's something that the Bureau doesn't kind of let you do, just talk to people, at least not in public. But that's an interesting, the investigative side is a very interesting one. So let's see what we can get in that regard. I'll poke around my deep state friends.
I kind of just think it would also just be fascinating to talk to someone who does who does public defender work at like a small to mid-sized city about like what they're like, you know, what it's like to do that. Like, it just like,
Yep.
it just kind of like, there's like a reason that they're always doing things from the perspective of the police and the prosecutor. It is like all of these shows, like all, you know, and there's no like, hey, you're like trapped under a pile of 4,000 cases, like on the floor of your public defender office. And like, you're barely able to keep things alive and pleading people out so that you can like make things, you know, go away. It's not like a sexy premise for a TV show, but it is the reality of kind of what most of what the defense side of this looks like. Ooh, we have some good people who are like Hannah Sassman, who works on predictive algorithms. Yeah, that is actually fascinating, the predictive algorithm stuff. Also, I'm friends with Julia Angwin, who is the editor-in-chief of The Markup, and previously at ProPublica, who did that great story about predictive algorithms in sentencing and how basically it was completely kind of screwed up. Thanks, Amanda. These are great recs. And Jonathan Rapping, great to talk to. Yes, he is always great. Liz Week says, listen to Hi-Fi's Nation, the Philosophy of Criminal Justice. Yeah, I have been listening to Barry. And my friend Sarah was just on the show. And then who else was on the show in the same episode? Was it Gideon Yaffe, who's like a good friend? Oh, Gideon would be so good on the show. Gideon does, for those that don't know, Gideon Yaffe is a law professor at Yale Law School, but he is a philosopher by training, and he does a ton of work that is basically on, I would say, like, he does neuroscience, but it's really about risk assessment and when you are capable of judging risk as a human. So like the fact that you really don't develop a robust sense of risk management or risk assessment until you're like in your mid-20s. Basically, your brain doesn't develop until then. And so like a lot of the laws that sentence juveniles to long sentences and like all of the ages of majority and minority, he basically argues are totally skewed and way off and like pegged to like completely things that we all talk about and know, but like Gideon goes out and empirically proves them. And so he does fascinating work. So he would be great to have on. I think he just wrote a new paper, and he's also a Guggenheim Fellow and like, you know, just a total genius in this stuff. I have like weird feelings, by the way, about Hi-Fi Nation. I don't know why. I never like can get into it. There's just something about it. Like it seems like it goes into too much. Maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but like it goes just like too far into philosophy without giving any explanation really about what the words that he's using mean, and just kind of having like an inside baseball conversation with people sometimes where I feel like they should be explaining what they're talking about, not just having like this kind of inside baseball conversation. I don't know if anyone else feels that way when they watch that show, but I like keep tuning in wanting to like it because I like the guests, but then I'm like always a little bit disappointed. Okay. And we have some other, there's some other really great suggestions in the feed. There's, someone is volunteering their uncle to talk about all of the stuff. The Bail Project is a great project. Yeah, anyone with any other suggestions? I kind of think, they call it the triangle, Ben, when you have like, the triangle of the judge, the defender, and the prosecutor, kind of forgetting the fact that there's like an actual human sitting behind the defendant, behind the defender. So like, I kind of think that if we can bring people in that can talk about all of those things or one particular side. You definitely have more law enforcement connections than I do. Mine are,
Yeah, I mean, so my law enforcement connections are weird because they tend to be more on the federal side and they tend to be more on the national security side than on the straight criminal side. But that said, I do have a lot. Um, the um, um, uh, one of the really interesting things to look for is people who have very diverse criminal experience. There are people who've worked state issues. They've worked defense and prosecution. They've worked federal and state. They've worked investigative and prosecution.
well, this might
And
be
so
another great reason to have Pope Hat back on.
yeah, I mean, so his trajectory is pretty common. That is going from being an AUSA to being a
But
um
17 years in the AUSA office is like it's like
that's a long time.
that's a
Yeah.
much longer time. Like if you stay in that long, you usually stay in on that side, I think.
So think about for a moment Eric Holder, who like people are, people have very complicated, people that have very different reactions to. But the diversity of his experience is astonishing. He was he's been a criminal defense lawyer in the private bar. He's been the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, which includes prosecuting local cases in the local courts. He's been a judge in the local DC court system, the Superior Court for the district. He's also been in a lot of Justice Department positions, including Deputy Attorney General and Attorney General, right? So that's like an incredibly broad swath of the criminal justice
I didn't
system.
know that he was controversial.
A lot of Republicans are, I mean, I don't think he's especially controversial, but my point was I wasn't raising him to as an act of like a political, like this is my political ideal point. I think highly of Eric, but my point was the reason I raise him was just as an example of this wild diversity of experience within the system.
I mean,
That I
to me,
think
that's the platonic ideal of like what you want in anyone who like reaches a senior position, either as like the attorney general or any type of like really powerful decision making position. That proves the entire like raison d'etre, in my opinion, of an adversary system, of a legal justice system, which is that it's about being able, it's not about an issue or like how you feel about like a given issue or a given person or a given situation. It's about a commitment to the system and being able to flip between those things, like which requires you to defend things you hate or to stand up, or to stand down on things that you would vehemently disagree with. I think that that's like exactly what you would want and that's always like what I've always taken Holder's resume to be, which is just like in my view, for precisely the reasons you said, unimpeachable.
I was once on a jury voir dire panel with Eric Holder.
No, really?
Yeah, it was very funny actually. So we were all it was Eric Holder, a guy named Harvey Rishikoff, who is Harvey was a senior FBI official, I don't know, 20 years ago, and he helps run the ABA's Standing Committee on National Security. He's a sort of prominent national security lawyer about town, and he and Eric and I were all on doing jury duty together. This is like DC is a
just
small
by
town,
chance?
Just by chance, yeah. And we all get called for the same jury, for this panel. And of course, Holder has been chief prosecutor in this court. He's also been a judge in this court. And this was during the transition from Bush to Obama. So everybody knew he was about to be named attorney general. And the judge in the case takes one look at him, bursts out laughing, and dismisses him. And I am the last person dismissed from the case. I was clearly peremptorily struck by one side or the other, and I don't know which. And Harvey was the foreman of the jury.
That's
So
amazing.
That's a
amazing.
fun little Superior Court DC story, you know?
My mom, they changed the law so that people who were actively judges could serve on juries in New York a number of years ago. And as soon as they did it, like a number of judges came up in the jury pool. And it was like a very bizarre thing. Yeah, I don't know. Like juries in general do not, or like, I don't know. I don't think we do enough time interrogating like the value of juries. I don't know. That's a much larger discussion, I guess. But like, I just generally just thinking about kind of all of the ways in which people get kicked off of juries, and my experience with them personally, being on juries, and then professionally having to watch juries get impaneled or reach a decision is kind of, I don't know, just always been interesting.
I agree that the jury system is one of the most interesting both for its positive features and its negative features. And, you know, I have served on a jury that, and I've also more recently, I get struck kind of routinely now, both because of my public persona, but also because of family members who have interacted with the criminal justice system. And, you know, I do think it's a very, if you line up the list of things that cause people to be attractive and unattractive as jurors, it becomes a very interesting study. And is that the world of decision maker that you really want? Becomes, I think, a pretty interesting question.
I mean, I think that's yeah, I completely agree. I think that there's so many aspects about how we do this stuff, but like the juries are fascinating to me. Where we draw age of majority and minority is interesting to me. The entire I don't know. I won't get into like police stuff because that's kind of like, but I just think that there's a lot of, I'm just fascinated basically by some of like the things that we take for granted in the criminal justice system and never talk about, like juries. Like, I just think that like they're so imperfect and so flawed, and they're so, yeah, I don't know. There's just.
So here's an idea for Criminal Justice Week. Because he's sitting there in the participants list, I think we should have John Barrett come on and talk about Robert Jackson and the famous speech to the U.S. attorneys that everybody quotes, and how that and Jackson's other non-judicial, non-Supreme Court life experiences shaped American justice.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. I mean, also
should we see if John wants to do that?
Yeah, John is awesome, obviously. Oh, hi, John. I didn't even know you were here.
I did say he was sitting there in the audience.
Oh, I didn't hear that part. Hi, John.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, John. It's good to hear your voice.
Good to see both of you.
How's quarantine going for you?
Good. I am in a non-Manhattan location now, so my ability to breathe and get outside has gone way up, and that's a relief.
Great.
So
I'm
for
not
those
done
of
with
you who-
grading yet of our, like, I don't know if you are, but I'm sure
I'm-
not.
No, I'm not done yet either. I don't find it much faster to grade pass fail than I do regular grading. So
Exactly.
So for those of you who do not know John Q. Barrett, John is a colleague of Kate's at St. John's Law School. He is also the world's foremost academic authority on the old independent counsel law, which, if memory serves, he came to his current academic specialty, which is he is the biographer of Justice Jackson, because of the quote from that from the speech that I referenced, the 1940 or 41 speech to the U.S. attorneys that appears in Justice Scalia's dissent from the case that upheld the independent counsel law. Am I correctly stating the unified field theory of your career?
you have a very scary and accurate memory. That's exactly right.
So, John, do you want to come on the show this week in an actual corporeal presence, not merely this ghostly disembodied voice that we have now, and talk
Good.
about Justice Jackson and his legacy?
I would love to do that. That would be great. So look at your calendar, and I'm open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at your convenience. It would be a lot of fun.
Let's just say Wednesday.
Great. I'll write it down somewhere.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Wednesday. Excellent.
We'll see you then, 5 o'clock on Wednesday.
Okay.
All right, that's easy. Any other I mean, that's going to be a really good discussion, because Justice Jackson is, I think, the greatest writer in the history of the court. And not just because of that speech, but he wrote, like, I think he's like the greatest prose writer in the court's history. And of course, he did take a break from being a justice to go prosecute the Nuremberg defendants. And so he's got this incredible story. And I think it's a great conversation for Criminal Justice Week.
Yeah, but also John is not, I'm a little biased, but John is just
John's
great at talking about
he's
this
just
stuff.
like one of the best guys in the world. And by the way, I met John Barrett like a gazillion years ago, I think, when he was, wait, I'm going to bring John back on this. John, am I right that we met right before you went to St. John's, when you were working with one Michael Bromwich in the Inspector General's office at the Justice Department?
I did work there, and that's about when we met. I don't remember if it was when I was still working in government or after I'd started at St. John's. You were at the Post and working on writing about different federal law enforcement related topics. So yeah, it could have been then.
But I'm not misremembering that you did a stint. You worked for Walsh, but then you did a stint working in the then still being built up Justice Department Inspector General's office, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was there for about a little bit under 2 years.
That's right. Okay. As long as then I know I'm right. And if I'm not completely wrong, then I remember that for a reason. Yeah. So we've known each other a long time. Yeah, so this will be fun on Wednesday. We look forward to it.
Excellent. Okay. Count me in, but mute me now because I must move on to other responsibilities.
All right.
But it's great to see you guys. Thank you.
Consider yourself muted. All right.
Yeah, so I like this week. I'll talk to Radley, see when he can come on. We've got it seems like we got a bunch of people. We have, like, I don't know if you heard me say, but Gideon Yaffe is an incredible incredibly smart person. He's at Yale Law School, and he does a bunch of work specifically around the ideas of age of majority and minority, and like the around the neuroscience of law and criminal law in particular.
Oh, that's a great subject. You know
Yeah.
who else?
It's like
is
the
at
reason I
Yale-
went to law school.
Who else is at Yale who I've always wanted to talk to, never met, and I just thought his book on the divergence of American and European criminal justice is amazing. And I want to say his name is Whitman.
Oh, yeah. Jim Whitman.
What's his first name?
Jim Whitman. James Whitman.
Yeah.
Jim is brilliant. Like totally brilliant.
I found that book completely revelatory. And I think I reviewed it for the Post. I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. And have never met him, and that's somebody I would really enjoy talking to. All right. Should we take a few questions and then wrap up?
Yeah, if there are any questions, we can always wrap early too.
So if people have, we seem to have gotten rid of the Zoom bombers. So if you have questions in the Ask Us Anything department, this is a good time before we vanish, and you can just raise your hands. I think unless your name is Ben Dover or Jackass or whatever, I think we'll trust you if your hand is just raised.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I'm excited for this week. Oh, Tony has a question. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Kate and Ben. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Super duper. Playing with the new computer, and it's not raining. So I had a question for Kate, and you might have already covered this, and if so, that's fine. We can move on to another question, and it's not necessarily law related. But today, just now, you tweeted out a picture of a pig you had met. And yes. It just got me interested in where you're from and how you ended up where you are now. I understand you grew up like small town farming, or?
No, not at all. I grew up in the suburbs outside of Rochester. But those pictures, but those, and I guess my family comes from a very rural kind of background, but those pictures are all basically from most of those pictures I have spent like the last 11 summers in Montana. Basically, the summer before I went to law school in 2009, I decided to do this program called WWOOFing, which is called Willing Workers on Organic Farm, or like something like that. Like I forget what it stands for completely. Anyways, and you can do it all over the world, or you could. And I decided to go to Montana because I always wanted to go there. Huge fan of Lonesome Dove, river runs through it, all of these things. Just thought it would be like this beautiful place to go. Picked out this farm and did with my vacation like 3 weeks of pretty hard labor. You trade your labor for room and board. Oh, hello. There's a dog.
Yes.
So anyways, I spent the next couple of
Can you guys see me?
No, we can't see you. But we had to mute you. Sorry, Tony. But the last couple of years, I fell in love with the family that owned the farm. They fell in love with me. They invited me back every summer. I go back for their garlic harvest. They're primarily a garlic farm. They hand harvest with a horse and cart, and it's totally sustainable and organic, which is not necessarily my lifestyle when I'm not on the farm. But they hand harvest about 3 tons of garlic that we pull out of like the ground in Montana. And after spending and load onto a horse and hang in a barn, and after spending most of your days out of the year just like this, stuck in front of a computer, typing and talking to other people who do the exact same thing. I have found that the 10 plus summers of doing that have been the most cathartic and amazing and wonderful experience in my life. It is not easy. I am like actually so tired and like sore. I have like a whole regimen of like caffeine pills and ibuprofen that I like now have, and like band-aids that I now like have, and I pack a bag of them like separate from everything else that like, but it's been, I don't know, it's just like a wonderful, they have totally different views on things. Like when I first started going there, they were anti-vax and like were very, you know, and they've changed their minds on that. They like, but they have like totally different views, totally different things. It's just like a wonderful, it's been a wonderful like, and I love the animals. They have great animals. So yeah, sorry, that was like a long answer to your question.
So we have a question from Christopher.
Yeah, it wasn't a question in the specific sense. That was just a proposal, because I started the book and I really got interested in that topic. So that was just a proposal for an invitation.
To Gabby Bloom.
Yeah.
That would be fun. So Gabby is the book Christopher is referring to, is a book that I wrote, I think in 2015 with Gabby, about sort of imagining the future of violence. And, you know, some of the book is out of date. Some of the book is remarkably not out of date. Among other things, we kind of very specifically discussed pandemic, you know, sort of in this case, it was engineered pandemics, but in the discussions of safety and sort of responding to these things, we very specifically talked about sort of architectures of safety that include, you know, good responsive public health infrastructure for non-man-made infectious disease. So there are aspects of that book that are a little out of date. There are aspects of it I wish we'd spent more time on 3D printing than we did. But there's aspects of it that are very current and still very worth talking about. So yeah, having Gabby on would be a lot of fun, and that's a great idea, and we should definitely do that. Amanda Kail, what's on your mind?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is actually Pippa Holloway. I'm using my partner's account.
You know, you faked us out.
Yeah, right. Two questions. One is thoughts about Janet Napolitano for VP. Question two is thoughts on the Jeff Sessions Trump Twitter feud. Anything good there, or is it just nonsense on stilts?
There's a Twitter feud between Jeff Sessions and Trump.
I think I might be using the term Twitter feud a little loosely, but there's something going down between Sessions and Trump, right? Yeah, over the Russia inquiry and whether Sessions sort of recused himself and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's all distractions from the much larger stuff, but I thought it was mildly amusing for a minute.
Yeah, so let's take the that latter one first. I think it is very much everybody wearing it on his sleeve. The president hates Jeff Sessions, and he hates him because Sessions recused himself from the Russia matter. The president felt betrayed by that and felt that Sessions had a obligation to protect him in the context of that investigation, which is of course not what the law requires of the Attorney General in that situation. Sessions, who was the first senator to endorse Donald Trump and is probably the political figure in the country who substantively most closely represents what Trump purports to represent. That is, immigration restrictionism, a kind of, sort of, there's a sort of racial tinged politics to Sessions for, many years now, many decades. But Sessions was has never figured out how to navigate Trump's anger at him. And so what you see in that exchange is the president, Sessions appears to be losing this race for the Republican nomination for his old Senate seat. The president has endorsed his opponent, and Sessions is upset about it and doesn't really know what to do other than kind of whine. And so that's, I think, what you see, the president raging at him about the underlying offense, which was, of course, he was legally obligated to do, and Sessions trying at once to defend himself, but also say, and remember that I'm the guy who actually really supports your agenda. And so I think, frankly, they both look pathetic in the interactions, and it's kind of I mean, they neither of them emerges looking good. What was your other? Remind me of the other subject you raised.
Janet Napolitano for VP.
So I think
Is
there's
that being talked about?
So
You're
Jonathan
first.
Rauch actually wrote a whole article proposing it. I think there's, first of all, something obvious to it. She's an enormously diversely accomplished person, from having been a governor of Arizona to having run a federal cabinet department to running, the UC system. This is a enormously diversely accomplished person who is accomplished in some of the rare ways that actually qualifies you to be president. And so I think if you're talking about like the leading candidates and say who are the ones who are, like in a deep sense, most qualified to be president, Janet Napolitano's got to be on that list. She's, in a way that a US senator is not, having run DHS, having run a significant state, these are genuine qualifications. She's also ferociously smart. And running the UC system is no small management and leadership thing. And so I actually think it's a very good idea, and I don't know if it's being seriously considered, but I think it should be seriously considered. I don't know. What do you think, Kate?
I mean, all of the, yes, of course I don't want to, I don't love the piling. I don't spend a lot of time obsessing about or bashing on Trump, despite my distaste for him. I know. I just find it like a huge energy suck and like everything else. But that being said, there are these moments in which you're talking and I'm like, oh, do we care about having standards for what for a president? You're like, if you're putting together a list of people qualified to be president, I'm like, oh, there's a list, there are qualifications. It's it harkens back to an age.
Very old world of me. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm just kind of I don't know. I mean, of course, obviously, I think she's great. I think, to go back to the Sessions thing, and I think we should ask Liz to ask her question and then wrap up. But to go back to the Sessions thing, I just think, and the VP debate, frankly, I think that there's this interesting thing that has only ever come gets kind of is undersold, which is like how dangerous Mike Pence is, and how I really like feel that there are so many people like Jeff Sessions who would respond really well to a Mike, and like there would be no rift or any type of like, there are just so many Republicans that would respond well to a Mike Pence, or to like Mike Pence being president. And that I just kind of, I think about that kind of in like when we talk about all this stuff, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Yeah, we've talked about this before on the show. I find Mike Pence distasteful, but not at all terrifying.
I just think I know a lot of conservatives who hate conservative Republicans who, I personally know a lot of conservative Republicans who have turned against Trump, but would not have turned in the same way against Pence. And that worries me. Liz, hi.
The
Hey guys,
floor is yours, Liz Weeks. You get the final
Are
question.
you Liz Weeks from Twitter?
yeah, can you hear me?
Hi, it's so great to
Yes.
talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you too. And I think just to keep it quick for you guys, my question is, it's graduation season. I think a lot of people go to law school with a sense of public purpose, and like even pandemic aside, the civic life has been turned upside down. So I'm kind of wondering like what words of wisdom or, advice or just thoughts you have for, newly minted lawyers in particular, but graduates generally you might have.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, Ben, do you want to start? I feel like I'm nervous to answer this.
Really? I mean, I'll start if you won't, but if you
No. Say something optimistic and maybe it'll trigger me into saying something optimistic.
Okay. So look, everything sucks, and it's a terrible time to graduate from anything if graduation implies that you're now expected to go out in the world and do things, because it's super hard to go out in the world and do things right now because we have a lockdown order, or things are not really open yet. And so I don't want to be patronizing and say to people, hey, you have all the opportunity in the world, your whole life is before you, because in some sense that's not true. A lot of people are going to graduate and they're going to be stuck at home, and when they finally are able to enter the market in a meaningful way, there are going to be a lot of people who were laid off who are further, who are going to get hired before them. And depending on how long this goes on, you're going to have a real backlog. And this is probably less true in the law than it is in some other areas. It's really true for people who are graduating from college right now. And so a lot of people aren't going to get employed. And a lot of people are going to have to take whatever jobs they can be offered, rather than be able to think about the reason they went to law school, or the reason they went to, whatever professional school, which was to go out and do good in the world. And so what I want to say to everybody is, I understand the constraints, and I totally understand that people have to do what they have to do in the short term. But never forget who you were when you wanted to do that. Never forget, the reasons that you were attracted to the law. And never forget that those are things that are still need to be done. I know somebody who's watching this right now who always wanted to be a federal prosecutor. And and I know people who always wanted to be, public interest lawyers of one sort or another. And if you're coming out of law school right now and, you have to grab what's available, just don't forget who you were when you went there, always wanting to have done something, or really wanting to have done something, to do something, wanting to work in a particular area. And the opportunities to transition back to those things, like you're in an unfair situation, which is coming out. It's always hard to come out into the areas that you want to work in. It is going to be particularly hard over the next couple of years. And all I will say is the people who want it most, who work, you know, will take it. They will find a way to do it. And if you remember, always remember who the person was who wanted to go into that field in the first place, that will be you. If not, you will drift in a different direction. And that's okay. That's my thought in response to.
I love that. I
responsive to your
love
question,
that.
Liz?
No, I love that. And I think I would just add that, like, listen, there are things that there's a type of person that often goes to law school. And then there's also a type of thing that law school imposes, a series, let's call them brass rings. You've gotten into college, then you get into law school, then you want to get onto like law review, then you want to like get a clerkship, or then you want to get a summer associateship at a top firm or a big law firm. The sooner that you break out of that mold and really do the hard work of asking yourself what it is that drives you and makes you happy and why you wanted to do this, pursue the law, maybe in the first place, whether it's like working on like human rights issues or working on like whatever it is, like there is like, and then like also just like the type of work situation that you want to be in, and like be honest about like what it is that makes you happy as an individual. I just think that like being aware of that, you just can't go wrong in event. Like Ben is right. You're going to have to work jobs that like aren't maybe going to be satisfying in the immediate term. And there's a lot of steps on the way to figuring out what it is that you want to be. But I would also just kind of add to Ben's thing is like, let go of the brass rings, let go of the label chasing of being like, I want to be a federal prosecutor, or I want to be, I want to be at Cleary, or I want to be at, or I want to be, I don't know, like, whatever else it, or like, I want to work for Maine Justice or whatever it is. And I would just kind of say, or I want to be a federal judge. It's just like, let all of that go and just be as true to yourself as possible. I know that's like a kind of a cliche, but like if you just literally interrogate yourself constantly about what it is that's making you happy and what it is that you want to do, that you will find yourself to that eventually, I hope. And yeah, it's, I'm excited. Oh wait, we have one more question, or what's going on?
No. I first of all, I can't bring her in to break this breaking news that she just messaged us about, because Miss Social has vanished from the list of attendees.
Yeah,
but she did leave in the Q&A.
Beth Wilkinson, huh?
Did you hear the latest about Mike Flynn? Judge Sullivan just hired a high-powered personal attorney to fight the case. And when I clicked on the link, turns out that yes, it is not just any high-powered lawyer. He's hired Beth Wilkinson, who is a very prominent.
Yep.
And so just for those of you who want a little background here, the story is that the DC Circuit, the Court of Appeals, has ordered him, the judge, to brief the question of why he has not yet granted, why he's acted the way he has. And so this requires, it's very rare. I can only think of a few cases that involve the DC Circuit, that involve something like this. So this requires the judge to brief a question. So he is now has gotten counsel to do it. So stay tuned on that. That's going to be interesting.
She's a big deal. She's like Timothy McVeigh, like.
Yeah, Beth Wilkinson was one of the prosecutors on the McVeigh case. She is a big deal. I forget which firm she's in now.
She's at Paul Weiss.
She's at Paul Weiss. She's a very, very serious member of the sort of criminal justice, the sort of white collar bar here. And it's a very good choice on his part to have it'll be very well briefed on the district court's behalf. So we're going to wrap. We will be back tomorrow with our mystery guest, and we're giving the final word today to the big blue blogger, who's eventually I will be able to pronounce that. So Michael, AKA Big Blue Blogger, what is the last word?
Oh, geez, thanks, Ben. I was actually going to bring the Wilkinson development to your attention, but it seems like you already hit that. I was wondering, any chance you could get Cass Sunstein on to talk about what's going on in the Supreme Court and what's next for them?
That's a very good idea. I think we could probably, we can certainly invite Cass, and I suspect he might even be willing to do that. That's a very good idea.
Beautiful.
We should have like a whole like specialists on the Supreme Court week, honestly, as soon as maybe like oral arguments wrap up for this term.
Yeah, and actually in the spirit of Criminal Justice Week, maybe we should have Emily Basil on, who
I would love to have Emily. We should talk to Emily. We should have Dahlia back on. We should have like all of the ladies from Strict Scrutiny back on together. We could totally do that. I bet Linda Greenhouse would maybe come on, although I don't know how great she is at Zoom, but we could certainly ask her.
I bet she knows how to use Zoom.
Nina Totenberg, I bet she would, anyways, I have like no shortage of people who covered the Supreme Court, I feel like. So
yeah, that's a good Supreme Court week kind of thing. But Emily's more for Emily would be more for Criminal Justice Week than for Supreme Court Week, I think.
Oh yeah. Do you want to?
She has a new book. Yeah, I'll reach out to her.
Okay.
All right. It's time to wrap. We will see you tomorrow with a mystery guest. Big mystery about who our mystery guest is going to be. Until then, Kate, what do we say?
If you can't have fun, in lieu of fun, come hang out with us.
See you tomorrow.
Bye, Ben.